Look at the Haggadah. Now, I would say, as a guess, second to the 5 books of Moses, the Haggadah probably has more commentaries than any other work of Jewish text. Every year, there's a holiday where it's the focus of the whole holiday. It's not very long, and at least on the surface, it's not very difficult to read. So it's attracted a lot of attention. And this attention lives in very many different types of dimensions. And as I usually say when I start a series of my own, I have my own training and my own preferences of things to explore. And when I say a pshat in Haggadah, I don't intend that that's what it means. Rather, it's one way of explaining it to make sense out of it from one point of view. And if you hear your other explanations, even other explanations that seem to be contradictory, that does not disturb the importance of hearing the pshat that I'm presenting. Even contradictory pshatim can be understood to contribute to a larger whole. My background is in philosophy, somewhat in mathematics. I'm interested in textual analysis in terms of the words and the logic. I'm interested in Kabbalistic ideas and Hasidic ideas. Those are the things that describe my particular sensitivity to the text. Now, the first element in the text, well, here you have preliminaries before the actual Seder. This is in this beautiful Haggadah. It's on page 6. It's the Simanei Seder, the order of the Seder service. Now we have 2 types of Haggadahs here. You see, if you have the other Haggadah, you know where the Simanim are. Say out the page so people will be able to know where it is. The 15 stages of the Seder. Okay. The order of the 15 elements of the Seder.
Page 6.
Well, that's the one we have. There's another one with a different edition. You have it? You don't have it?
I don't see the other edition. Oh, this one.
Yeah.
There's another edition.
This one?
We see what page it's saying.
Okay, yeah, on this edition is page 4. It's
The order of the Seder is page 19 in the Art Scroll Torah series. Yeah, Haley, can grab one.
Yeah, okay. So you have it on 19 over there, and we have it on 6 over here. So we're all set. Now, there are 15... there are 15 stages in Haggadah. There are also 15 steps in the temple going from the entranceway to the highest point. There are also 15 of the Psalms, which are called Shirei HaMalos. Shir HaMalos, Malos are steps or stages or elevations as you go up. So 15 clearly is an important number for this kind of procedure. 15 is also the numerical value of one of God's names, spelled with a yud and a hey. So that would have some relevance here. I want to point out one little piece of grammar, which I found at least one commentator points out. And the English doesn't preserve it, so you have to understand it in the Hebrew. I'll translate it to you and see if you pick up where there's a break in the continuity. Say the sanctification and wash their hands, eat parsley, break the middle matzah, relate the narrative, wash hands, say grace, eat bitter herbs, eat horseradish and harozes with the matzah, partake of the meal, eat the middle matzah, say grace after meal, say the Hallel, prayer for acceptance. Okay, now listen again, carefully. Say the sanctification and wash hands, eat parsley, break the middle matzah, relate the narrative, wash hands, say grace, eat bitter herbs, eat charosas, break the meal, eat the middle matzah, say grace, say hallel, pray for acceptance. What's the break? Hmm?
Prayer for acceptance is
Okay, listen again. Say the sanctification and wash hands, eat parsley, break the middle matzah, relate, wash, say, eat, partake, eat, say, prayer. How about and? Hello, between 1 and 2 there's an and none of the other ones have and.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a little odd, isn't it?
well,
It's a little strange.
They skipped that in this English translation.
That's why I put it in. I read it, I put it in when I translated. I said that. The answer to this translation, what's an and here and there? Because they don't pay attention to the things that are really important. So the and means that the first two are joined together in a way that the other ones are just a list of step after step after step. So let's think about that. Number one is sanctification, making kiddush. And the second one is washing hands. Kiddush means doing something that produces, expresses, describes holiness, sanctity. Washing hands typically is a way of getting rid of something on the hands that's not good, dirt or whatever. It's symbolic of disposing of something that needs to be eliminated. So it's a positive and a negative. Now, when you think of working on your spirituality, both types of actions are necessary, both positive and negative. Of course, to rise in spirituality means, in part, to absorb more inspiration, absorb more information, exercise more discipline and more courage, reaching for higher developments. That's all positive. Also, there are things that hold you back, and things that hold you down. Those things need to be addressed, to whatever extent weakened or neutralized or even expunged. So both aspects are necessary. Now the question is, in what order do you do this? Or is there an order? Maybe just work on both simultaneously. There's a famous verse written by King David, Sur me'ra v'aseh tov, turn away from evil and do good. Sounds like King David is telling us this is how you do it. First turn away from evil and then do good. And part of the explanation is, you as an agent, when you perform an action, the whole of you is the agent performing the action. That means if you have good elements in you, they're part of the action. If you have bad elements in you, they're part of the action. It's a mixed bag. For most people, most of the time, it is a mixed bag. So it sounds like, listen, you want to do a real good, not a compromised good, not a blemished good, not a semi-good. If you want to do a real good, you have to first rid yourself of the negative elements so they won't participate in your performance of the good. Turn away from evil, sur me'ra, and then aseh tov, do good. And there are schools of Jewish spiritual growth which use that as their theme. Some schools talk about first focusing on failures, detracting elements, and doing one's best to try to expunge them, and then turning to rising in the positive direction of more spirituality. But not all sources express it that way. In the fifth blessing of the Shemona Esrei, where we talk about recognizing our failures and trying to overcome them, the petition goes like this: Hashem, please bring us back to your Torah and bring us close to your service, and help us do perfect tshuva, repentance. So tshuva is how you address the negative and try to detach it, rid yourself of it. But it's preceded by bring us to your Torah and bring us to your service. Those are positive. So it sounds like we're asking for help in growing in the positive first, and then after that, we're asking for help in expunging the negative. That's the opposite order. So one could ask, how do you make sense out of the two orders? And here's a suggestion that's made in the literature. Maybe King David, when he says, turn away from evil and do good, isn't talking about steps 1 and 2. Maybe he's talking about steps 2 and 3. And here's how it goes. The first thing you do is do something good. Attach yourself more thoroughly to Torah. Invest yourself more in Hashem's service. Do something good. Is it a blemished good? Yes. Is it only a semi-good? Yes. There are still negative elements, and they're participating in the doing of the good. But it's a semi-good. It's a blemished good. It's a good with blemishes. That's not nothing. That's not nothing. And the semi-good, the blemished good, gives one the strength to then turn and rid oneself of the negative. And then in step 3, go back to do a good which is not blemished because the negative has been expunged. So it's a 3-step process. Do a compromised good, use that reinforcement of the compromised good to then turn against the negative and expunge it, and then turn back and do the perfect good. Or, more realistically, it's 2n plus 1. It's an odd number. You start with doing the blemished good, and then that gives you the ability to somewhat overcome some negative elements. And then you go back and do another good, which is a superior good now, because there are less negative elements in it. And that gives you the strength to turn back and then work again to expunge more negative elements. And that's how you make progress. But you could start, the way it is in the Shemona Esrei, you could start with doing the good. My Rebbe Zatzal, when I asked him, should I engage in reflection and self-evaluation, cheshbon hanefesh, it's called in Hebrew, which some people do every day, some once a week, some once a month. We all do it on Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, the 10 days. Should I do that? And he said, yes. He said, I have to, but he said, it's appropriate to do, with one condition. Always start your self-evaluation with something good. Think over your day. Find something that you did during the day which is good, and dwell on it. Meditate on it. Yes, yes. I struggled with that. I made the right choice, and it came out well. I did the right thing. And pat yourself on the back. And then, after you created a basically positive self-image, then go on to investigate the negative things which may need help. The emphasis in the Hasidic movement was always to start with the positive. Now, back to the Haggadah. So here it says, sanctify. Do something holy. And then wash your hands. Because there are many things that have to be washed off. I did find one Hasidic commentary who didn't generalize it beyond the night. He said, usually you follow King David, but one night of the year you're given a special help from heaven to be able to start with the positive and then turn to expel the negative. I believe that from the bracha and the Shemona Esrei, you have an indication that there are two schools of thought here. There were schools of Musar that stressed the greatness of man. That was the basic orientation. And from the point of view of the greatness of man, that's how they started to make their progress. There is a Kedushas Levi, I'm not going to go through all the details that he goes through, but the colloquial way to put his point is, there are two types of Musar. You say to a person, you know something? You're a wreck. You're a disaster area. You're so low you'd have to reach up to touch bottom. You're really... And if you don't pull yourself together, you're going to be a nothing. That's one type of Musar. There's another type of Musar. Listen, you're really doing very well. I would give you a 92 average, but you're capable of a 98. Chaval. Why not get the last 6% that you're capable of? Why not make it a complete performance? Don't leave it at 92 when you could do a 98. Pull yourself up and do that last bit to make it as good as possible. It's also Musar. Both are exhortations to improve, but they start in two different ways. For those who know the literature, the water that came from Iraq after they left Egypt, before they got to Sinai, is where they got the first type of Musar. And at the end of the 40 years, when Miriam died and there was no water, they got water from Iraq. That was the positive type of Musar. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it to happen. That's where the Kedusha Levi says it. At any rate, I think that's what's hidden. One of the many things hidden in the fact that there's an extra vav here, which connects 1 and 2, which you don't have in all the rest of the elements in the Seder. Are we together? Yeah, we spent now 15 minutes talking about a vav. It's worth it. It's worth it. Vav is a very important letter. And so is every other letter. One of the things you'll learn as you go through this type of learning over and over again is pay very careful attention to every letter. Yeah. It's a collection of things from different times. We know that because in the beginning there are a few sentences in Aramaic, and the rest of the Haggadah is in Hebrew. Some of the Haggadah is in the Mishnah, and some of it isn't. So, each piece would have to be. Rav Kasher wrote a Haggadah where he classified all the pieces and where they came from, who authored them, but they're different. Yeah.
Just to clarify, say the sanctification step is the good part, and then washing hands is removing the...
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, ready? Okay, fine. Now, let's take a look at Kiddush. Well, I'm going to skip the part for Shabbos because this time it's mostly Shabbos. There is Havdalah. This is the Kiddush for holidays, and it has a number of important elements in it that I can explain. Obviously, every word is important. It speaks of Hashem who, hath, who's chosen us from among all people, exalt us above all languages, and sanctify us with his commandments. Now notice the order here. If someone said, you know why we're special? What makes us special, what makes us different, is that God assigned to us a special task of living up to the 613 commandments, and thereby perfecting the creation, so forth and so on. Sinai is the time when we became a nation, when we received the Torah, and the Torah is what makes us special. That's not exactly what this says, because he says he chose us and exalted us, and only third sanctified us with his commandments. That seems to mean that there's something there to base a relationship before and independently of the commandments that we got. And after all, God chose the patriarchs and matriarchs. And they're hundreds of years before the Torah was given at Sinai. So there has to be something essential in the Jewish nation beforehand that at least qualifies for the beginning of this relationship. And he gave us the language, which is the official Jewish language, which is Hebrew, and that's somehow more, it's exalted, it's raised above all the languages. Now, of course, you study language and the history of language, it will definitely be programmed into you that all languages are artificial, they're all conventional, there's no particular connection between C-A-B-L-E and this, or C-A-T and what the ones that roam around outside. They're just sounds and symbolic representations, and in different languages they are different, and there's nothing to make one right or wrong. Well, that's generally correct, but the vast majority of Jewish sources say that Hebrew isn't like that. Hebrew is a language which is connected to the real world. The letters of Hebrew were the elements out of which the creation was made. The words of Hebrew, indeed, it says in Genesis, it says word for word, God brought the animals to Adam, and he called them their names. It doesn't mean he made up a syllable. Okay, that one's a sloth, and that one's a turtle. And no, he knew what the letters meant. He knew what the combinations meant. He looked at that animal and said, this is its name. I'm not dubbing it with an arbitrary name. No, That is its name. And then someone who speaks that language, his thought processes are molded by the language which has that special relationship to reality. There was a French from the 19th century, I guess he was a kind of sociologist, and he made the following remark. You can judge for yourself what it's worth. Pity the poor English and glory the great French. Because, you see, the French language has a noun and then adjectives after it. Because that's how the mind thinks. The mind thinks of an object and then thinks of its qualities. The British are crippled because in English, the adjectives come first and the noun comes afterward, which is against the way you think. That's what's wrong with the British, among one of the many things that the French think is wrong with the British. Their minds are all confused because their language is backwards from the way you think. That's an actual thing that a French savant said. Of course, a lot of the answer is simply that the way you think is molded by the language you learn to speak. Not given beforehand. And if the French has one order and English has a different order, then the English probably will be thinking the way English is because that's what they learned to speak, and that had an effect on how they think. What you speak and how you speak does have an effect on how you think. And if you start off with Hebrew, if Hebrew is your first language, or at least a language that you speak, that will have an effect on how you look at the world. And this shows itself brutally in mistranslations. Many dictionaries will tell you shalom means peace. What does peace mean? Well, peace means absence of disturbance. A peaceful night means no air raid sirens, no explosions. It's peaceful. In English, you could say that the graveyard is very peaceful. That's true. You could never say the graveyard is shalom in Hebrew. Never. Shalom comes from a root which means complete. Completeness in a certain sense of perfection. It means it has a lot of different elements. They integrate into a whole where they contribute to a function in a smooth, organized, and efficient way. We're not looking for just no bullets. We're looking for shalom. It's a different idea. So if you speak Hebrew and think of shalom, and you report it in the New York Times, peace, it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be the same idea. At any rate, so we have that language. Because we have that language, we have a special relationship to the way the world is, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it, and therefore to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the creator. And the patriarchs and matriarchs lived lives that expressed godliness, because human beings can have godly characteristics, which isn't obvious, shouldn't be taken for granted. If the creator is an infinite being and not a spiritual being, spirituality is something he created, along with tables and chairs. Spirituality is just a feature of the created world. He's beyond even the spiritual. If we had been told, and of course, therefore, human beings and God can't have anything in common, we'd have nodded our heads and said, of course not. That's obvious. So when we're told it's not so, we have to pay attention. There is one of the 613 commandments, which is you should acquire godly characteristics. Just as he is gracious, so you too should be gracious. Just as he is merciful, so you too should be merciful. Other sources say, just as he is holy, you should be holy. So that means that in spite of the fact that there's this infinite gulf between us and the Creator, we can possess something like his qualities, his characteristics. And some of you know very well a verse in Genesis which backs this up. What verse is that? God created man in his image or in his form or something. God gave man some godly characteristic in him. It says that explicitly. Part of the relationship that carries is the possibility of expressing those qualities which are godlike qualities, like loving kindness, for example. So, that being the case, when people, like the patriarchs and matriarchs, express those qualities, then they qualify for a special relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You want to ask a question?
Yeah. Rabbi Matalon
kind of suggested at something like this in the last year in regards to like our nishamas, or maybe it was Rabbi Cooper Smith, or I'm getting the two confused. The point is that potentially the godlike characteristic that he's put in us, or is there something more than that potentially?
No, that is it. You remembered exactly correctly. Now, I'll tell you what the tradition describes the neshama as, though I have to be careful because very often in our corpus of information, words are not meant to be literally, or not the way that literally a 6-year-old would understand them. The soul is described as the chelik Eloka mimal, which in dictionary meaning is a piece of God on high. Yeah, wow is right. And the Zohar says, the verse in Genesis says, God blew into his nostrils a soul of life. And the Zohar says, when you exhale from the middle of your body. That's where your lungs are. Which means it comes from the innermost part of your body. Why does the Torah use the anthropomorphism of exhaling? To tell you that what he projected into Adam is something that's very close to what he is. Now, of course, I hope I'm not shocking you, but God is not a salami that you can slice up into slices. So when he said it's a piece of God on high, it doesn't mean you're slicing God into slices. But what it means, one way to look at one part of what it means, is that when you look around in the world and you look for things which, on the surface of them, on the face of them, express godliness, the human soul is the highest thing. Higher than angels, higher than the spheres that carry the stars, whatever it is. The thing that he created, a soul is a created thing, like a tree is a created thing. But that thing carries in the world the character of godliness more than any other thing in the world. And Ramchal in the way of God, by chapter 2, goes into this in great detail, in very sophisticated and complicated detail, but it's there. So, as I said, when someone lives in a way that expresses that qualifies him for a special relationship with God. And that is expressed in a phraseology which you all know, and which the Midrash stands on. We talk about God as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Never anyone else. Never. Not God of Moses, not God of David, just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Midrash says that David said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why is it such an exclusive club? Why must it be only 3? I volunteer. I want you to be known as King of David. So God said to him, well, look, I tested them, and they passed the tests. So David says, test me also. So God says, you're on. I'm burlesquing this, but okay. Right? And he gave him a test, and he failed. I said, see? They passed. Yeah, you didn't pass, so I'm not going to be known as King of David. But the idea here is the idea that the lives of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, though they are hidden more, but those people, their lives more consistently and more completely expressed the godliness that man is capable of than the lives of any other people before or after. And that's why the idea of calling God the God of Abraham has the following application. You're talking to a person for whom Judaism is not clear, he's learning for the first time, you say, listen, you want to learn about God? Study Abraham's biography. You'll learn a lot about God from Abraham because Abraham was a godly person. So you'll learn what it means to be godly, and therefore you'll learn something about how God runs the universe. Right? There are 3 people for whom that could be said. And that's why he chose them and had the special relationship with them. And that's part of what it means here in the Kiddush when it says, he chose us from all peoples and exalted before languages before he sanctified us with his commandments. These are preconditions for the sanctification of the commandments. Okay, what do you get so far? Now, the idea of sanctifying us with the commandments has at least 2 applications. First of all, when a person performs a commandment, that creates a certain holiness in him. Some Sforim, like the Tanya, picture it this way. God issued a command. This person takes that command into his mind, and with his will, he makes himself into a vessel to express that command in the world. So it's God's command in him that's being expressed by what he does. That's a very exalted connection to God. That itself, and they take the word mitzvah, take the middle two letters, tzad vav. Tzav in Hebrew can mean connected to. So that's one way in which a mitzvah sanctifies a person. By giving us those mitzvahs, he gave us a procedure by which we can sanctify ourselves. There's another explanation as well. In, I think it's Parshas Nitzavim, it says that Akash Baruch Hu says through Moses to the Jewish people, God's Torah is not far from you. The mitzvah is not far from you. It's not in the heavens that you should say, who will go to the heavens to get it for us and bring it down to us? Not over the sea to say, who will go over the sea to get it for us? No, it's with you, in your heart and in your mouth to do. It's a very famous verse. Rashi there says something very interesting. He says, it's not in heaven, because if it were in heaven, you'd have to go there to get it. So you read the Rashi and you think, oh, really? I mean, I'd have to go there to get it? Like, how would I do that? I mean, isn't that just by definition impossible? And the Sfas Emes says, if a Kodesh Baruch Hu commands you to do something, that gives you the capacity to do it. The command enables you to do it. Ramchal's the image is the king chooses someone for a job, and he says, I'm giving you royal authority. He gives him a document signed by the king. This fellow has royal authority to do X, Y, Z. Okay, with that document, he can do it. Everybody else is going to, bow down and help him to do it because the king gave him the document. Hurmana de Malka. Because Baruch Hu, by giving us the commandments, projected into us the ability to fulfill the commandments and to have the impact on the world that the fulfillment of the commandments encompass. So that very giving of the Torah at Sinai elevated us and sanctified us. Before we started to perform them, just the fact that we were elevated to the position where we could do them. Those are two elements in being sanctified by the commandments. Then, after that introduction, it says, with love you gave us when it's not Shabbos, we'll skip that. Now they translate solemn days for joy. I wouldn't translate solemn days. Moadim l'simcha, chagim izmanim l'sason. That's yom. So let's translate that. Moed in Hebrew means a meeting. Avad in Hebrew is that terrible word for a committee, which I, as a professor, I was so happy we had a chairman of the department who said, we won't have any committee meetings. I'll interview you privately, each of you to get your ideas, and then I'll make the decision. I said, good. We don't need meetings. Grandstanding and everybody showing off and everything else. Forget it. It was much better that way. Moed is a meeting time. The holidays are meeting times. Kodesh Baruch Hu makes himself available to us so there can be a connection. And therefore simcha, for joy. Joy comes from being in connection to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So there are meeting times for joy. Now, a chag is a time to be celebrated in a certain way, and a zman is a time on the calendar. Now, the time in the calendar isn't arbitrary. And here we come to something which is portrayed differently in different sources. I'm not sure that they disagree, or maybe that each one just talked about half a picture. The natural thought is, why do we celebrate Pesach on the first day of Pesach on the 15th of Nisan? Well, that's when it happened. That was the night in which there was the death of the firstborn, and that was the day in which we left Egypt. That's our liberation day. That's when it happened. So every year, on the anniversary of that day, we celebrate what happened on that day. That's true. That's true, and that's fine. But it leaves open a question. Is there any reason why it happened on the 15th of Nisan? And if it happened on the 16th of Tammuz, we'd have celebrated on the 16th of Tammuz, because that would have been this anniversary. And there are Sforim that say no. The 15th of Nisan was set aside from the creation of the world to be the Jewish Liberation Day. It's a Liberation Day inherently, even before the events take place. And that's why the event takes place then. And you have a hint of this in the Torah itself. You probably have heard the incident when the three angels came to Abraham and he showed them hospitality. And then they left Abraham, and two of them went to Sodom, where Lot was living. And Lot gave them hospitality. They came towards the afternoon, they came into his house in the evening, and he made them a meal, a drinking party. And the Torah specifies a meal, a drinking party with crackers. Crackers! Don't make a mistake, crackers. Matzos, it says. So be careful. We just say, really? That's how we treated them? Crackers? Like, why did he do that? Especially since when they went to Abraham, Abraham told Sarah to make breads. And the oral tradition says because it was the 15th of Nisan. It was the first night of what will become Pesach hundreds of years later. And even before the Torah was given, Abraham knew that, and Lot knew that. They kept what they could of the mitzvahs that were available, and even then. So, when we talk about zmanim, the time in the calendar is not arbitrary, and therefore that's one of the words for the holiday. Now here we have Sason and Simcha, which says Moadim the Simcha, Chag Yismanim the Sason. The Gaon of Vilna explains those two words as follows. Both of them are signify a happiness. Simcha is where you prepare for something, you build something, and you manage it. And so when it comes to fruition, you have Simcha. Sort of like getting a degree in university. Spend 4 years working on it, and then you get the degree. You satisfied the conditions and made it happen. Sason is something that's unexpected. There's a verse, Sason ichi alim rosecha kamotzi shel harav, I rejoice on your word as someone who finds a great treasure. Most people don't go hunting for great treasures. Sometimes they stumble across them, but they don't go hunting for them. Here, sometimes you have a surprise, something you didn't anticipate, which turns out to be very, very valuable. And life has both aspects in it. I usually say this when people are getting married. You planned for this, you made decisions and evaluations, and you've planned your life together, hopefully, and what you want to accomplish and where you want to do it, so forth and so on. And there will be surprises. Prepare yourself for the unprepared, anticipate the unanticipated. And some of them are really extraordinarily inspiring. The other person, you and the other person, have certain features which interact with one another in ways that you couldn't have dreamt of. And they make the marriage a much more joyful union than it would otherwise have been. To prepare for both. Holidays we prepare for. We know it's coming, we know what the laws are, we know all the preparations you have to make. But if your eyes are open and you're sensitive, you also experience things which you didn't prepare for, which are also part of the rejoicing of the holiday. You had a question?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Okay.
I was hearing the cat
Yeah.
in the room.
Yeah.
Maybe it fell down in the bed.
No, it's there's a depression there. It's not in the room. I don't think so. And then you have the name of the holiday. Now here is a little bit of a secret. Just Levi talks about this. The name of the holidays in the mouths of the colloquial speaker and the name of the holiday in the Torah are often not the same. For example, the up-and-coming holiday in 3+ weeks is? Pesach, right? Pesach. Nowhere in the Torah there's the word Pesach used for the holiday. The word Pesach is in the Torah. What is it used for?
The doors passing over the houses.
Good try. This is a samach, is a samach, not a saf. Yeah, it's for the Paschal sacrifice the day before Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan. And sometimes it's used for the 14th of Nisan because that's the day in which the Paschal sacrifice takes place. Nowhere in the Tanakh is the holiday called Pesach. It's called Chag HaMatzos, the holiday of matzah. Well, we should think about that. Why would the colloquial language of the people not follow what the Torah says about the holiday? And there's another example of that. Our year begins with which holiday?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Absolutely. Nowhere is there a Rosh Hashanah in the Torah. Nowhere. It's called Yom HaZikaron. Yom Trua. Yom Trua or Zichron Trua. The day of the shofar blast. Why is that? So the Kedushas Levi says, if you look systematically at the difference between the Torah's name and our name, the Torah gives the name according to what we do, and our name gives it according to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. Now that's very interesting. We call Rosh Hashanah either Rosh Hashanah or Yom HaZikaron, but Rosh Hashanah. So let's take Pesach. The word Pesach, with a samach, is a word that describes what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did on the night of the destruction of the firstborn in Egypt. Matzos are what we do. We eat matzah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives it the name according to what we do, and we give it the name according to what he did. The year begins with Rosh Hashanah, we say. That's the beginning of the year. That's the yearly cycle from the creation. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did. He calls it Yom Trua, the day of the shofar blast, which is what we do. Each one is seeing it through the eyes of the other. And the root for this is where, just before they come into the land of Israel, the Jewish people have a war with Midian. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moses, tell the people, I want you to exact the revenge of the Jewish people because of what they did to you. I want you to make war on them and exact revenge. And Moses tells the people, we have to go to attack Midian so as to take God's revenge against Midian. The verses are back to back. Because Baruch Hu was calling it our revenge, and we're calling it his revenge. The same thing. And Kedushas Levi says this is symptomatic of a love relationship. Because in a love relationship, a lot of the time, you see the world through your beloved's eyes. You see what it is for your beloved. So when you see the differences in the names, that's something which is expressed by the difference between what the Torah says and what we say. So that here's just a question of the language you use. Nothing is stam. Nothing is, oh yeah, that's just how it happened. And leave that for the anthropologists and historians who make a living out of not discovering things. Okay, now here it's called, Pesach is called Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. Well, as a matter of fact, there are a number of different words in Hebrew which speak about the idea of freedom. And you should pay attention to this because Hebrew is a language with very small vocabulary. Maybe there are things that ancient Hebrew speakers had that didn't enter into the writings that we have, but the language that we have, based on the writings that we have, is a very small language. And when you translate and think in English, English is by far the biggest language in the world, just because it borrowed from us a lot of other languages. That's why you can make a lot of nuanced distinctions in English that you don't have in Hebrew. So when you find one subject for which Hebrew has a number of different terms, that's very important. That means this very small language dedicated a number of terms to this one subject. Then you have to pay very careful attention to the differences between the terms. For example, cognition There are at least 5 different terms in Hebrew which talk about cognition. That's very, very important. So here you have cherus, which is the word that's used here. Then there's chofesh, which also means a kind of freedom. And then there's dror, which is another word for a type of freedom. So those things have to be distinguished. Cherus here, my Rebbe Zatzal taught us, cherus can mean freedom, and the same letters can mean to engrave on stone. It's quite a far relationship. Free, which means like unattached, unfettered, unlimited. And yet it's also engraved on stone. And the tradition comments on it. That is charus al luchos, engraved on the tablets. And the Rebbe said, when you say on Pesach, Zman Cheruseinu, you should be thinking ahead to Shavuos, when we received the tablets with the 10 pronouncements engraved on it. And there's a very deep idea, a million great deep ideas. But here's a philosophical idea. Let me ask you, someone gives you a rule that you must follow. Does that increase or decrease your freedom? Decrease, for sure. There'll be times when you wish you could do something else, but there's the rule. And the rule might be positive or negative. There are times when you like to do something, the rule says don't do that. All rules decrease freedom. But some rules, in addition to decreasing freedom, increase freedom. And indeed, some rules increase freedom by decreasing freedom. Here's a very simple example. Drive only on the right side of the road. What do you mean? 50% of the road is off limits. Right? 50% of the road is off limits. Now you can go someplace. If everybody's driving on all sides of the road, nobody can go anywhere. So by losing 50%, you gain access to the whole road on your side. The very fact that you lose the 50% gives you access to traveling. Here's another example. Chess. I'm sitting at a chessboard, and we're in the middle of a game, and I take my knight, and I move it straight forward 3 spaces and take off his queen. He says, you can't do that. I said, sure I can. Watch, I'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, off with your queen. No problem. No, but when we're playing chess, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? Who's telling me what I can do, what I can't do? I'm a red-blooded American. Don't push me around. Don't tell me what to do. I do what I please. Yeah, you can do what you please, but if you do what you please, you can't play chess. Because chess is a game where you do what the rules say. That's what makes it possible to play the game. You can't play the game unless you give up your freedom to move every piece any way you want. Okay, it says games. Why are you talking about silly things like games? What about language? Does anybody tell you what you must say? I say and plus blue. That's how I talk. Good for you, but no one's going to listen. You can't communicate if you just say words randomly. To communicate, almost every combination of words is off limits. What a gigantic loss of freedom. Yeah, but then you can communicate. That's worthwhile, isn't it? So sometimes there are laws which limit. Every law, every rule creates limitations, gives and removes a certain amount of freedom, but it creates the possibility of doing something extremely valuable. That's the way you have to look at the rules of the Torah. They very greatly guide and manage your behavior, but they do so, lahavdil, in the spirit of an army trying to win a war and being told that at 12:06 you attack here, and at 12:15 you attack there, and then at 1:30 we retreat, and at 3 o'clock we attack again. It's like a dance, you know, and then the enemy's confused, and then you overrun the enemy, and you win. So these rules very greatly restrict our freedom, but on the other hand, they make possible the accomplishment of something which otherwise couldn't be accomplished. So that's the idea of the freedom that you get on Pesach is really for the sake of attaining the capabilities that what's engraved on the tablets will give you on Shavuos. That's cherus and charus. How much can be built into a word? An infinity can be built into a word. I'm just scratching the surface. Okay? We're together with this point? Okay. Might be worthwhile when Pesach comes to say Kiddush slowly, eh? Give yourself a chance to think a little bit. Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Pesach is a memorial to the exodus from Egypt. Yeah, it sure is. That's when we left Egypt, so we can't deny that. I want to just add one point here, and we'll pick it up again tomorrow. We say that many things are a memorial to the exodus from Egypt, and one of them is Shabbos. In the Kiddush for Shabbos, we say the same thing. Some commentators, Rambam included, asked, in what way is Shabbos a memorial to the exodus? Did we leave Egypt on Shabbos? No. It was either Thursday or Friday, according to the two different opinions in the Gemara. It's either Thursday or Friday. It wasn't Shabbos. So in what way is Shabbos a memorial to the exodus from Egypt? The Rambam has a very direct, straightforward answer. One of the things you do on Shabbos is you refrain from all physically creative work. That's the vast majority of all human employment and human needs, is to manipulate the physical world in certain ways. If you're a slave, you can't do that. You don't have your own self-authority, your autonomy to decide not to do that work. Every time you stop doing that work, you should think, how did I get here? I only got here because of the exodus from Egypt. That sentiment is echoed in the Haggadah as well. So, very simply, if you know where you are and know where you would have been without the exodus from Egypt, you say, okay, so the very fact that I can keep Shabbos means I'm a free person, and that's because Kodesh Baruch Hu took me out. The other idea is this. I just told you that when you think of our freedom, you think of where you're going. Pesach inaugurates a certain process which comes to fruition on Shavuos. Every holiday of the year has a calendar date except Shavuos. Shavuos is the 50th day after the beginning of Pesach, no matter what date of the month of Sivan it comes out in. And in ancient times, it could come out on the 5th, 6th, or 7th of Sivan. Some years on one, some years on the other. So it's the only one that, in other words, its whole essence is to be the capstone of Pesach. That's what Shavuos is. That means Shavuos from that's what Pesach from the very beginning is, aimed at getting to Shavuos and receiving the Torah. It's freedom for the sake of receiving the Torah. That's what it's for. So that being the case, it's a projection on a scale, and that's the idea also of Shabbos. Shabbos is the purpose of the week. That's why it comes at the end of the week. I never understood how they explained to themselves, the Christians, when they changed the calendar, when the Roman emperor said, I'm going to institute Christian rules for the empire, but you're not getting 2 days off a week. Pick one. So they had the biblical Sabbath on Saturdays, and they had what they called the Day of the Resurrection on Sundays, and they celebrated both of them. They pick one. So they just moved the biblical Sabbath to Sunday. They just moved it. And that's codified to this day. Most English calendars, the first day of the week is Sunday. There's a working week calendar, which is artificial, but the real, they start with Sunday. So it's the first day of the week, not the last day of the week. Hello! In the Bible that they have also, the Sabbath is the last day of the week. That makes a gigantic difference. Because the whole week is aiming to Sabbath. Sabbath is the purpose of what you do during the week. That's the goal that you're going for. So that's similar to what's going on here. Pesach is seen as the beginning of a process with a goal and orientation. That's also a way in which it's related. Okay, we're just working on Kiddush. We'll pick it up tomorrow in Seshem.